1 million years ago, something looked across a strip of open ocean, stared at the horizon, and decided to go anyway. It didn't have a compass, it didn't have rope or nails or a single tool sharper than a broken rock. It didn't even have language, probably. And it looked at deep water, the kind that never dries up, not even in the worst Ice Age droughts, and it built something that floated, got on top of it, and left. That's not a human. Not yet. That's Homo erectus. And this is the story of how "let's cross the water" became one of the oldest ideas our lineage ever had. Picture the strait between Lombok and Sumbawa in Indonesia. Warm water, strong current, no land in sight on the far side. This isn't a river crossing. This is an open, unforgiving ocean, the kind that has swallowed modern sailors with modern boats. Now picture a creature with a brow ridge instead of a forehead, a brain 2/3 the size of yours, standing on the shore with a bundle of bamboo and vine. It's about to make one of the boldest bets in the history of life on Earth, and it has no idea it's making history. It's just trying to get to the other side. So here's the question that should be bothering you. How do you even begin to answer when did humans build the first boat, when boats are made of wood and wood rots? Stone lasts basically forever. That's why we can hold a hand axe from 3 million years ago and it still looks like a tool. But a canoe? A raft? Left out in the open, it's gone in decades. Buried in normal soil, it's gone in centuries. The ocean doesn't preserve receipts. Which means the real first boat, the actual first hollowed log or lashed-together raft that carried the first passenger across the first stretch of water, is gone, permanently. We will never dig it up. We will never carbon date it. It doesn't exist anymore, and it never will again. So archaeologists have had to get clever. Instead of looking for the boat, they look for what the boat left behind. People in places people should not have been able to reach. Let's start with the stone tools, because the stone tools are the smoking gun. On Sulawesi, researchers have found sharp flint flakes struck from river pebbles dated to at least 1.04 million years ago. On Flores, at a site called Wolo Sege, similar tools sit embedded in volcanic ash layers dated to around 1.02 million years ago. On Crete and on Luzon in the Philippines, Acheulean hand axes turn up on islands that were never connected to any mainland even during the lowest sea levels of the ice ages. Here's why that matters. All of these locations sit across the Wallace Line, a deep-water trench in Southeast Asia that has stayed submerged through every glacial cycle in human prehistory. It didn't freeze over. It didn't dry up. There was always a gap of open ocean between here and there. No land bridge, no walking across. If a hominin's stone tools are sitting on Flores or Sulawesi 1 million years ago, that hominin got there somehow, and swimming across a deep ocean channel isn't really on the table for an animal that isn't a seal. Now fast forward almost 1 million years and the picture changes completely because the wood finally shows up. In the Netherlands, in a bog called Pesse, archaeologists pulled out a single log of Scots pine, hollowed into a canoe dated to around 10,000 years ago, roughly 8,000 BCE. It's about 3 meters long. It's the oldest actual boat ever physically recovered. And it's not alone. In Nigeria, the Dufuna canoe, 8.4 meters of carved mahogany with a pointed bow and stern, dates to about 8,000 years ago, pulled from what used to be the shoreline of a vanished inland sea called Mega Chad. In China, at Kuahukiao, a 5.5-meter pine dugout turns up alongside actual wooden paddles, roughly 6,000 BCE. In Italy, at a lake called Bracciano, 5 oak and beech canoes sat preserved in mud for about 7,000 years, complete with internal wooden ribs carved to keep the hull from flexing. every single one of these survived for the same boring, unglamorous reason. They got buried somewhere with zero oxygen, a peat bog, a lake bed, river clay. No oxygen means no rot because the bacteria and fungi that break wood down can't function without air. Pull that same log out into open air today and it starts falling apart within hours unless conservators freeze-dry it or soak it in chemical stabilizers. These boats survived by accident in exactly the handful of places on Earth where the mud swallowed them whole and never let go. Here's where it gets complicated, because 1,000,000 years of stone tools on islands doesn't prove someone built a boat on purpose. It proves someone got there. Those are not the same claim. One camp, led by researcher Robert Bednarik, actually built working bamboo rafts using nothing but replica Lower Paleolithic stone tools and sailed them across the Lombok Stretch through rough water to prove it was physically possible. His argument, you don't get repeated hominin populations showing up on the same islands over hundreds of thousands of years by accident. You need enough people crossing together, men and women, to actually start a population. Random luck doesn't produce that pattern. The other camp says maybe it doesn't need to be a boat at all. During tropical storms, huge rafts of vegetation regularly break off riverbanks and drift out to sea. We know large mammals, giant tortoises, even stegodons, extinct relatives of elephants, reached these same islands by floating or swimming on natural debris. A handful of hominins clinging to a storm-torn mat of trees is a much lower bar than deliberately engineered seafaring. And there's a second fight layered on top of that one. Some linguists have proposed that building a seaworthy raft, gathering the right materials, and coordinating a crossing proves early humans had actual spoken language. You can't organize something that complex without words, the argument goes. Critics push back hard on this one, pointing out that plenty of complex tool-based behavior gets passed down through pure imitation and gesture, no language required. Impressive coordination isn't the same as proof of speech. Nobody has settled either argument, and with the physical evidence gone forever, nobody may ever be able to.
For decades, one specific canoe almost got written out of the story entirely. When the Pesse canoe was first pulled out of that Dutch bog in 1955, a visiting scholar looked at it and said it wasn't a boat at all. Too narrow, too unstable, probably just an old feeding trough for pigs or a storage chest. For years, that theory just sat there. Then, in 2001, archaeologist Jaap Bucher decided to actually test it. He built an exact replica using only Mesolithic-style flint and antler tools, launched it on a lake, and had someone paddle it. It floated. It was stable. It handled fine. And Bucher pointed out something that should have ended the debate immediately. There was no animal husbandry in Mesolithic Europe in 8000 BCE. There were no domesticated pigs. The feeding trough theory wasn't just wrong, it was chronologically impossible. The oldest boat on Earth had almost been demoted to a barnyard prop. Here's the part that should mess with you a little. The engineering choices these people made by trial and error are still sitting under every boat built today. Those wooden ribs carved into the hulls at Bracciano 7,000 years ago to stop the hull from flexing under pressure, that's the exact same structural principle behind the internal frames in a modern steel ship or the ribs in a fiberglass kayak. The tapered, pointed bow and stern on the Dufuna canoe, shaped to cut through water with less resistance, that's the same hydrodynamic logic behind every speedboat and ocean liner built in the last century. Nobody invented these principles twice. They got worked out once in mud and firelight with stone tools, and then never really got replaced. So think back to that shoreline again. The strait between Lombok and Sumbawa, 1,000,000 years ago, no boat that will ever be found,
no name that will ever be known. Something stood there, looked at water it had never crossed, decided the far side was worth the risk, and pushed off anyway. Every hull ever built since, bark canoe, oak dugout, aircraft carrier, Mars rover parachuting through a hostile atmosphere it's never touched, is really just the same decision made again, with better tools.